Three, two, one. Hello, my name is Dan Taylor, and firstly, I'd like to say thank you to the SEO Camp'us team for having me here at this great virtual conference. And also, I'd like to express my admiration on the difficult job Avail have had of turning around the initial conference back in March to a great virtual event now. So, well done on the hard work there. So my original talk back in March has evolved quite a lot and has had to adapt a little bit from there due to just general changes in our understanding, new studies, and also the introduction of web stories from Google. I am, of course, talking about Google Discover and how we can, I'm going to say optimize as a word, and get the most out of it as SEOs for both traffic for clients and also general improvements in that way. So the underlying tone here is that a part of Google Discover on a lot of Android devices is that it does give push notifications for new content discovered, especially around high importance issues such as at the moment Assassin's Creed Valhalla has been released. I've done a lot of searching around it, a lot of content has been consumed, and I still get push notifications now when some authoritative gaming magazines publish on that. So first, kick things off the obligatory who I am slide. So as I said, I'm Dan Taylor. I'm head of R&D at Salt Agency. We're one of Europe's technical SEO houses. In 2018, I won the inaugural Tech SEO Boost Innovation Award for research into practical applications of things like Cloudflare workers and Akamai Edge workers. And then I also write for some of the industry blogs and magazines. I remember just a small handful of websites and tools which we've built, which you can test out for free. So first of all, let's kick things off and actually talk about what Google Discover is. Because when people think about Discover or think about Google, they just see the product of search. But obviously, Google is an umbrella and have a way that people can discover the same content, unless effectively your websites can change quite a bit from being Discover, traditional search, ads, assistant, etc. So essentially right now as it stands, Google Discover is a portal-like feed. It's not the first portal-like feed out there. Everyone who can remember the 90s can remember things like Yahoo being prominent, Netscape, even the old AOL browsers. And it's not even one of the more current ones. Yandex in Russia have had something called Zen, which has a similar portal and content created feed to what Discover does, and that's been around for the past 5 years, albeit a very different system of how it appears. So Discover is a feed that provides personalized content based on heavy user search behavior. So what I tend to see in my feed will be different from what you see in your feed and vice versa. While not directly mentioned, in 2018, Ben Gomez in the Google 20th anniversary post alluded to how user behavior and how their interactions with the internet was changing from being linear search to journeys. And that ties in with what we understand around the intent, and also to an extent kind of helps reaffirm what our opinions around Discover were. Now in my March talk, this is where my March talk ends, I should say, in July 2020, Google did a significant update to their help documentation around how we can better create content and optimize for Discover. The general consensus with what a lot of people out there had studied, done research on, was reaffirmed by the changes in this documentation. And also interestingly, it introduced EAT as a topic to that specific document. On a top level, just whilst we're going on the introductions, we know from the studies and also personal experience that typically some articles only stay around for about 3 days in Discover, although they can reappear depending on the content type. There is definitely a connection between core search algorithm updates and Discover, noting that search is different to Discover, is governed differently by algorithms, but generally the same quality that is judged within the core algorithm is also used for what we believe as part of how Discover works in surfacing high expertise, authoritative and trustworthy articles. Google have also publicly stated on a number of occasions that we shouldn't rely on Discover as a traffic source just due to the sheer volatility and how uniquely the feed is made up. So based on this and the fact that Google has all this help documentation and we've done a lot of research around this, what does Google themselves actually have to say on how we can optimize for, discover and reach all these users in this brand new way? Well, Google have actually said there's no direct way to optimize content for ranking in Discover. So if we just took Google's word for everything, that really should be the end of this talk. This is probably one of the shortest 5 minutes of your life. However, going through help documentation, understanding what we know from research, we are able to pull a TLDR out here. Essentially, titles need to be trustworthy. So this is taking a step away from the old social medias of 10 years ago with heavy clickbait and nonsense, the over-exaggeration of the content snippets. So this is the prime example of 15 amazing SEOs. You won't believe who number 9 is. So over-exaggerated, no one cares. They also, within pretty much their documentation and probably in how they now process language and understand sentiment about using negative emotions around the content itself. So don't incentivize clicks just through things like rage, upset, that morbid curiosity. But then go on to say the more generic stuff, which we kind of already know, produce the timely and relevant content that provides unique insights, not just churn and burn content for the sake of keywords, but arcing back to eat again with clear authorship, high quality imagery, which Brody Clark has done some great studies on, and I'm going to go through some of his studies through this. But also interestingly, that you must comply with Google's content policies, which are actually outlined for Google News, which again is a separate product. Now, just because you comply with Google News policies doesn't mean you're going to be eligible for Google News, but you need to comply with those policies to be eligible for Discover. And also, kind of goes without saying at the bottom, your content needs to be mobile friendly, and it is 2020, so I'm hoping that bottom bullet point's kind of redundant now. So touching base on us on image optimization, which from the studies that some great SEOs have done, and from what I've seen with my own anecdotal evidence and playing around with clients, can make an impact. The sort of cheat sheet around this is the featured image of your article, or the image declared in your open graph needs to be 1600 by 840. You can validate this as well through sort of Twitter card validator, as pictured on the right. Facebook and LinkedIn have their own versions. We also recommend you losslessly compress your images to the smallest file size possible, and don't just rely on something like Cloudflare or Cloudinary to serve a CDN image. If you want to be serious about this, you want to be doing a compression. Make sure you've got a descriptive file name, and I've specified with hyphens, because we all know what happens when you upload a PDF or an image with white space in the name. You just get the percentage sign 20s, it looks a mess, it breaks it up. Alt text is also good for the image, so that should be appropriate. Again, not a direct SEO factor, but if that's in search, not Discover. In Discover, it can help. And also have a user-friendly descriptive caption. Just again, helping describe what's in the image, helping with Google's image recognition and training in that way. Brody has also shown us through his studies, especially with thumbnails, that unique imagery is heavily favoured. Again, is adding uniqueness. Uniqueness is quality as a perception. And even though the images are really quite large, when Google shrinks these down to be a thumbnail, even when it pulls this through into normal search, make sure that the main point of your image is in the center. So if you just do that small thumbnail, if you can still make sense of what's going on, then that's good. If it's kind of like broken off to the side, or one of those weird catchphrase things from a TV show, and you need to work it out, probably rethink the image. So still talking about images, about a year and a half ago, Google introduced these really cool filters as part of image search, where essentially you perform a search and you get some filters up to kind of, well, basically drill down into more of what you mean. Kind of like with people also ask boxes in normal search. With easy image search, you're searching, in this example, Gdansk, a city in North Poland, and this is going, okay, did you mean the map? Did you mean Christmas markets, medieval? It's even recommending Sopot, which is a little town just a little bit further on. Both are lovely. But what you can do with these images, you can see very clearly here, but Google is associating all these other terms and all these other topics with that core topic of Gdansk. And from there, you can build out a tree using these image entity tags around that core element of Gdansk itself. So if you're stuck for thinking of creative imagery, alt texts, how you can actually make this content better, especially for more evergreen pieces, which I'm going to come on to in this, is that you can use these for images themselves, for file names, alt text, captions. If you're doing a piece on Gdansk, throw a picture in of a shipyard. Make sure the alt text is there. Include the caption. That way, when Google is looking over the page, looking over the topic and images, it's kind of already knows all these things are related. You're just literally feeding it and ticking more boxes with what is related versus not. The second one I want to cover over is going to be quite short because AMP, I'm not the world's biggest fan of. I understand its place in the ecosystem for publishing websites, but I think outside of publishing websites it's not necessarily useful. But with web stories and Discover, it is. So with Google AMP, it surfaced stories late 2018, and it gives us this really great, useful mechanism to do so. As you can see from the screenshot on the right, through Discover, AMP articles can get a lot of traction over time, and it acts as fast because Google understands HTML, it's lightweight. And in July 2020, this also correlated with web stories, which I'm going to go on to the next slide, but I also want to stress that given that with Discover, you still need to have an optimized website and optimized content. AMP is not a silver bullet and a be-all solution to speed problems and content delivery issues. With web stories, however, it is important because with web stories, they can appear either as a Discover carousel, as you can see on the right with a moving GIF, within normal search themselves as a grid of images, which is extremely powerful in terms of real estate and click-through rate, and also overlay icons within Google search. If the image comes from a web story, it can connect through there. Again, this uses AMP technology, and you can use Google's own AMP test to check for validity. So one of the main key elements of Discover, which outside of the technical elements is probably one of the more resource intensive, and that's understanding how to get content into there and also the time relevancy factor. So AMP, Google Discover, as you'll see, throws up content at different stages of its life cycle. You'll get the evergreen pieces, which will surface probably every couple of months, depending on timeliness, and then you get the more immediate sort of few hour publish to go, couple of day go, depending on time sensitive in real life events. If you really want to be succeeding in Google Discover, you want to be mixing these two content types together. But this is also where understanding that it's not just content to sell. It's pretty much non-commercial, it's pretty much non-promotional, and it's just about creating good user experiences and engaging through your content with them. So the two, this can be broken out further, but really the two key elements I focus on with clients for this is you want to be doing the evergreen pieces, and then also actual active pieces. You could call it news, short blogs, topic blogs, opinion pieces, but basically you need to show you're up to date and show you've got an authority and build it up that way in your niche. So evergreen content typically is often seen by SEOs as the big long form content hubs, glossaries, things like that. With this, it's single posts. It's one really good comprehensive article on how to do X, Y, Z that will pretty much not change over time. Most people use examples of things like how to boil an egg, how to change a tire. They're pretty much not going to change foreseeably in the near future. They require minimal maintenance to maintain, and over time, they'll come in to discover, they'll drop out, discover, they'll come in to discover, they'll drop out, discover. You can't predict this because, again, it's down to the user and their personalised feed, but it has got that propensity to do so. And I've linked there to a problem with better guides on the internet for helping leverage and create the evergreen content. Now, immediate industry news pieces have got a very short lifespan within Discover. These are examples of things like at the moment, as you'll see in previous screenshots, Assassin's Creed's just come out. A lot of articles are going around about the guides. It's exactly the same when movies come out or breaking news stories. Everyone will cover it. Everyone will put different angles on it. There'll be a flash in the pan for interest, and then after 4 or 5 days, no one really cares anymore. They've moved on to something else. They're consuming better content or consuming a different way. Because there's no fresh thought coming out, Discover recycles and also moves on with that progression. The important thing to note with this is that you can't just start up a website and start throwing content around a particular niche out there and expect to perform yourself in Discover. You need to build up that perceived authority specifically relating to those topics and entities, and not do a kind of a scattergun jack of all trades approach. You have to really build yourself up and almost invest in the brand to do so. The other important thing to know is that Google has a lot of data to help you with this, especially around things which you know are annual or seasonal events. So at the moment, we know it's November 15th. We know that from mid-August, a Mariah Carey song starts to trend. People start searching for it. And as you can see on my graph, pretty much like it does every single year, that peak is coming. Now, understanding how the trend that your users work, using things like Google Trends, even just using your own knowledge about the seasonality within your own industry, if you know that something is coming up in a couple of months and users are going to peak for search interest, have that planned into the content calendar and have it ready to go. So you're not caught on the back foot, but also build up to it in terms of article seeding ahead of time, so that when it comes to the punch and you're throwing out the really high-end articles, you've built up a bit of relevancy in the coming weeks and months, if not the relevancy that you've built up for your brand and all content produced since the start of time for your website. That way you're giving yourself the best opportunity within Google to show that you're an expert, a trustworthy expert, and you're an authority with that content for Discover. So this is why I've called this showing potential to the feed. So in reality, the 5 ways to really show the Google you've got potential is, or your potential is there for Discover, is you need that defined topic cluster. So if you're an online magazine that reviews for Forex and Bitcoin, stick to Forex and Bitcoin. Don't start talking about general economics and stocks. If you're a magazine reviewing games and consoles, stick to that. Don't start reviewing board games and other stuff. Keep that niche to yourself and show that topic cluster is yours and you're an authority in it. If you can naturally branch out into other areas, do so. But also just remember and factor in, you need to do it in a structured manner as to not basically become across like a generalist, because if you're a generalist, you're not an expert. You also need to be timely and active as active as your competitors in terms of both content curation and promotion. Now, this isn't just a lesson for Discover, but probably a lesson for SEO altogether. But the key thing with achieving anything in marketing is to do what your competitors are doing plus one. So if you've got a competitor in the same niche as you, covering the same topics, churning out YouTube videos, live Twitter streams, live YouTube streams, actual pure written articles, opinion pieces, interviews, you need to look at that and go, right, I need to do exactly the same as that. If not, find something they're not doing. And that way, you can actually carve uniqueness and form yourself out. A lot of people fall down when they see competitors doing that, and we'll just write blog posts. You've already lost because someone else is doing more. Someone else is engaging on more platforms with more users in a different way. And the third point, going back to the technical elements, and this is again around having that authority and trustworthiness elements, is having visible authorship. Now, not just at author level, but at company level as well, because if you're completely transparent, there's no deceptive elements to it whatsoever, and your authorship can be trusted. Fourth, goes without saying you need to invest in branding, either if you're an individual, it's your personal branding, or if you're a company, it's your brand itself. Building up a brand for branded SERPs, building up anything in a knowledge graph, having well, make the understanding of what your M rate is and how that maps and associates to other things. If you build yourself as up an entity within Google, you're halfway there to being recognized as a brand. If you're recognized as a brand and then related to your topic clusters, you stand an even better chance of getting you to discover. And then the final technical point is what I've called at least have baseline technical. So that's HTTPS secure, mobile friendly, fast, actually just refined for the modern user base and modern devices. So this is where I've put a Venn diagram of basically potential into here. So you want to optimize your content for normal organic search performance. If you're writing an article or a series of articles, you want to think, right, how would these perform well within normal search? How will these offer a different point of view? How will Google differentiate my opinion on X versus someone else's opinion on X? Work it that way, add in the content uniqueness and the content quality, and that's step one. Second step of anything is engagement, and that can be done through promoted social, promoted link, promoted email, just even promoted all stuff in Google. Basically, you want to drive engagement to that content, but then also you want to make sure people are sharing it on social a lot, sending out email shots, make it social. Basically, the more engagement you can drive to an article you've invested in, the more signals, especially within Chrome, within Crux, will give Google that you've got potential to perform well in Discover. The other thing to also look at is if your competitors are in Discover, and also understanding who your competitors are, especially around specific topics. So, and this is also where it kind of branches away from just these elements of Discover, but also the wider search argument, and also the question of, well, if X are doing, well, if X are doing Y, why can't we do X? Was due to just a plethora of factors that go into this. So first of all, ask yourself why they're sharing your competitors' content. Are they a larger brand? Are they more well known? Just find those gaps. Be brutally honest between them, because if it is a case of branding and they're just a lot more established, then you know where you need to work, and unfortunately there's no quick fix for that. So is Discover a short-term strategy for traffic in that instance? Probably not, but you at least know where you stand in the marketplace. Have a look at what your competition is doing differently. So again, look outside that specific content piece. Are they generating more signals in general? Are they better on social? Are they producing lots of YouTube? What is the structure going around that piece of content? Don't just look at it on a page by page level, because if you look at one piece of content versus another and don't take into account any other external variables, you'll always see a better piece of content produced by yourself. Have a look at what makes their content different. Does it tie into a series? What's their internal linking like? Is one website with it? Is there a video version? Is there a podcast version? And also, when it comes to actually beating that piece of content or doing better, do you have to be different? Do you have to come up with a different angle? Basically, if there's only one way to explain something, just analyze what you can actually do to say the same thing but with a new take plus one. Is it the fact they've just had more shares? Is it the fact they've had more engagement, more interaction? The content itself might not be an issue, it's those surrounding elements. So the next couple of slides as well, I've just basically linked to all the articles and all the sources which I've used during this talk to make life a little bit easier for you. And all these links and these slides will be available at dantaylor.online/SEO Camp. And if anyone would like to follow me on Twitter, my handle's here as well. So I would like to say thank you and open the floor to any questions.